An attorney and director of pro bono services at a Chicago law firm, Jonathan Baum is seeking a second term on the Evanston Township High School board. I'm Bill Smith, publisher of Evanston Now. Welcome to our Meet the Candidates series. Jonathan, what do you see as the most critical issue that's facing ETHS over the next 4 years?
Well, I have to say there are two. One is, how do we meet the individual needs of our tremendously and excitingly diverse population of students? And the other is, how do we come up with the resources to do that?
One of the issues that we've seen is that the graduation rate is still pretty good, but there's about 10% of the students who don't graduate within 5 years. What do you think is the best approach to try to reduce that, and how much do you think you can actually improve the graduation rate or reduce the dropout rate over the next, say, 4 years?
Well, I don't know if we can ever get it down to zero, but we are making tremendous strides, and mainly through programs of not giving up on kids after 4 years, going into the 5th year. We've actually got kids now at our school who are in an alternative program, who we've gone out and called their families and called them and said, come back, okay? And we've brought them back, and they are working on a self-paced learning thing through a computerized program. And I think that shows tremendous promise.
So what's a reasonable level to be able to get it down to over, say, 4 years? Could you knock another couple, 3 percentage points off?
Yeah, we probably could. Knock 2 or 3 off.
One of the big issues that's been drawing a lot of attention recently is the new PARCC tests that the state is requiring of the school districts. And there seems to have been a lot of complaining from school officials and from parents about the new tests. But given that the old tests are no longer available, and we need to have some kind of assessment to tell whether the schools are doing a good job, don't you think that some of this griping is kind of a waste of time?
Well, it depends on the nature of the griping. I have sat and met with legislators, begging them to delay implementation of the PARCC because it's not ready. And maybe it will never be ready, I don't know. I'm not a professional educator, so I wouldn't say this is the test we should use and this is not the test we should use. But I do know what the criteria are for the assessment system. And first of all, you're absolutely right. We have to have an assessment system. We have developed, and I'm really proud of the fact that we have now developed joint board goals with District 65 that run from the early grades through the highest grades at ETHS. We have to have an assessment system to measure that growth. So it seems to me that an appropriate assessment system has to meet 4 criteria. First of all, it has to run from the earliest grades to the upper grades so that we can measure that growth all the way along. Secondly, it has to be nationally normed. Third, it has to be logistically practical in terms of computer usage and space and those kinds of requirements. And finally, in order to avoid excessive testing, the assessment system has to serve multiple purposes. And that's the critical flaw I see right now with PARCC. PARCC cannot replace the ACT, for example, at the high school level, because no colleges accept it. Even Illinois state universities will not accept the PARCC as a basis for admission or placement. Okay? So what we need is an assessment system that serves all of our needs, that serves the state's needs to measure how the schools are doing, that serves our internal needs of improving instruction for students, and finally that serves our students' needs by helping them be accepted into and placed appropriately in college.
The old system that was used required another test beyond the ACT, right?
Yeah,
so,
right.
so in a sense, PARCC is replacing another test that still wasn't the ACT, but but is the issue that it's taking longer, more time for the students to be tested in the new system?
That's an issue, and it is taking a tremendous amount of time. But it's also these other questions. It's not a nationally accepted test. In fact, the number of states that are participating in PARCC has been shrinking. So that really gives you cause for concern. And as I say, if we have at the high school, in the span of a month, our students have to take the ACT, the PARCC, and, for example, AP exams, none of which substitute for each other, but with the cumulative testing burden, that's a real problem.
The state has got a whole bunch of financial problems. Teacher pensions are woefully underfunded, and there's talk of reducing the amount of state aid that local school districts would get. What do you see on the horizon for school financing here over the next 4 years?
We are going to face some very dramatic challenges, particularly at the state level. The logic, the math from Springfield right now does not add up, because we have the new administration in Springfield saying we're going to freeze property taxes, which are 80% of our revenues. We're going to reduce income taxes, which is most of the other 20%, and we're going to increase aid to education. That math doesn't work. Now, I suppose in a sense we're fortunate that we aren't more dependent on the state, because the state cuts don't impact us as severely. But the state revenue loss is going to be significant. The pension burden, and in many cases, you know, local school districts are being punished for the sins of the state. The pension situation is the best example of that. We need to do the best we can with the revenues that we have. One of my concerns about some of these schemes about reallocating state aid among districts is that they don't take into account how many very low-income children we educate in our Evanston school districts. They supposedly are taking that into account, but we know it's not true, because if you look at how the numbers work out, at least under SB 16, Evanston schools lose more money, both percentage-wise and in actual dollars, than New Trier. Now, that's because Evanston is considered a rich district, like New Trier is a rich district, okay? And what I'm saying is that true equity across the state would focus not on making things fair between rich districts and poor districts, but rich children and poor children. And if you have a lot of poor children to educate, the state funding ought to reflect that.
One idea that's been advanced as a possible solution to deal with some of the financial issues is consolidation of the school districts. And do you see that as a possibility, or what kind of consolidation do you think could be achieved?
Well, maybe it's because of my background, having served on the District 65 board, and I think I've heard I was the only person in 40 years who's ever served on both boards. But bringing the District 65 and District 202 together into one learning community has been really my consuming passion on this board. And we have made tremendous progress. We have made more progress on that in the last 2 years than probably the previous 40, 60, or 80 years. We have joint achievement goals. We have requirements that the superintendents jointly report on the progress of the students together annually to the two boards. We have a joint calendar development committee. We have all sorts of economies of scale that we've achieved through cooperation. So I guess what I'm saying is I am doing everything in my power to see to it that from the standpoint of the taxpayer, from the parent, the student, that District 202 and District 65 are as if they were one district, even though they are separate districts. And I'm not ready to give up on that yet. If the day comes when we can't achieve, it seems that we can't achieve the kind of single learning community that I'm aiming for, then I think we'd have to talk about considering consolidation.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan. You can learn more about the spring school board election and keep up on the rest of Evanston's news by subscribing to the Evanston Now email daily newsletter. I'm Bill Smith. Thanks for watching.